The marble floors of the Langham Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Sheikh Amara Al-Rashid paced frantically across the opulent lobby, his tailored Armani suit unable to mask the desperation in his dark eyes. At 42, he commanded, oil empires worth billions, wielded power that could topple governments, yet today he felt utterly helpless. His phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from board members in Dubai, investors in New York, and partners in London, all waiting for news of the most crucial deal of his life. "Sir, we've called every translation service in London," his assistant James said breathlessly, clutching a tablet filled with rejected calls. The car accident that injured Professor Williams happened at the worst possible time. No one else is qualified to handle classical Arabic translations at this level. Amara's jaw tightened as he stared at the conference room where European oil magnates waited impatiently. The $2 billion merger with Continental Energy Group hung in the balance, a deal that would expand his empire across 3 continents. But the contracts were written in classical Arabic, as per tradition, and the European executives insisted on understanding every clause before signing. "What about the university professors?" Amara demanded, his accent thick with frustration. "Surely Oxford or Cambridge has someone qualified." James shook his head grimly. "It's Saturday, sir. The few we reached are either out of town or refuse to work weekends. Professor Williams was our only reliable contact." The gravity of the situation settled over Amara like a suffocating blanket. 20 years of building relationships, negotiations, that had taken 18 months, billions in projected revenue, all crumbling because of one missing translator. His phone rang again. This time it was his younger brother Khalil calling from Dubai. "Amara, the board is getting nervous. The stock price is already fluctuating based on rumors. If this deal falls through..." Khalil didn't need to finish. Amara knew the implications. Their competitors were circling like vultures, ready to swoop in on any sign of weakness. The Al-Rashid empire had been built on precision, timing, and never showing vulnerability. In the corner of the lobby, almost invisible among the grandeur, a young woman in a simple gray uniform quietly dusted an ornate vase. Layla Hassan moved, with practiced efficiency, her hijab neatly arranged, her movements careful and deliberate. At 28, she had learned to make herself invisible in places like this, where her presence was tolerated only as long as she remained unseen and unheard. But her dark eyes missed nothing, especially the heated Arabic conversation taking place just meters away. "We could postpone," James suggested desperately. "Tell them there's been a family emergency." Amara's eyes flashed dangerously. "Postpone? Do you understand what postponement means in my world? It means weakness. It means our competitors will have time to undermine us. Continental Energy Group has 3 other offers on the table. If we don't close today, we lose everything." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Amara closed his eyes, feeling the weight of generations of Al-Rashid legacy pressing down on his shoulders. His grandfather had built their fortune from nothing, surviving political upheavals and economic crashes through sheer determination. His father had expanded globally, always staying one step ahead of their rivals. Now it seemed Amara would be the one to watch it all crumble because of a missing translator. That's when a soft, clear voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "Excuse me, sir." Every head in the vicinity turned toward the young woman in the cleaning uniform. Layla stepped forward with quiet dignity, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I speak classical Arabic fluently as well as English and French. If you need a translator, I would be honored to assist you." The silence that followed was deafening. James's mouth fell open in shock. Several hotel guests stopped to stare at the audacious maid who dared to address one of the most powerful men in the Middle East. But Amara's expression shifted from surprise to intense scrutiny as he studied this unexpected savior. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from as we witness what happens when desperation meets opportunity in the most unlikely circumstances. Amara Al-Rashid had built his empire by reading people, by recognizing potential where others saw obstacles. As he studied the young woman before him, Something in her bearing, her confident posture despite her humble uniform, caught his attention. This wasn't the nervous stammering of someone seeking attention or reward. This was quiet competence, the kind that had saved his business deals before. "You speak classical Arabic?" Amara asked in Arabic, his tone testing, skeptical. Without hesitation, Layla responded in flawless classical Arabic, her pronunciation perfect, her grammar impeccable. "Yes, Your Excellency. I completed my master's degree in linguistics and Middle Eastern studies at Oxford University. I specialized in classical Arabic literature and contemporary translation methods." Her words flowed like poetry, each syllable precisely articulated in the formal dialect that even many native speakers struggled with. James nearly dropped his tablet. The hotel manager, who had been watching from behind the concierge desk, hurried over with obvious distress. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry. She's just housekeeping staff. I'll have her removed immediately." But Amara raised his hand, his eyes never leaving Layla's face. "You studied at Oxford?" he continued in Arabic. "What was your thesis topic?" "The evolution of diplomatic language in classical Arabic texts from the Abbasid period, with particular focus on trade negotiations and contract law," Layla replied smoothly. "I analyzed how modern business Arabic maintains syntactic structures from 8th century commercial agreements while adapting to contemporary legal frameworks." Amara's eyebrows rose. This wasn't casual knowledge. This was expertise that even his usual translator struggled with. "If you're qualified for Oxford," Amara said, switching back to English, "why are you working as a cleaner?" For the first time, Layla's composure flickered slightly. Pain flashed across her features before she composed herself. "Sometimes circumstances require us to take whatever honest work we can find, sir. Education doesn't always guarantee opportunity, especially for people like me." The phrase "people like me" hung in the air, loaded with implications that Amara couldn't quite decipher yet. But there was no time for deeper inquiry. Through the glass doors of the conference room, he could see the Continental Energy executives, checking their watches, their patience clearly wearing thin. The deal was slipping away with each passing minute. "Sir," James whispered urgently, "we're running out of time. The Europeans are threatening to leave in 30 minutes. Amara made a decision that would change everything. "Miss Hassan, Layla Hassan. Miss Hassan, I'm willing to offer you £5,000 to translate for this meeting. But understand, this is not charity. This is a $2 billion deal. One mistranslation, one error, could cost more than you'll earn in a lifetime. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Layla straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. "Your Excellency, I understand the gravity of the situation. I wouldn't have offered if I weren't completely confident in my abilities. My reputation and my daughter's future depend on doing this correctly." The mention of a daughter added another layer to the mystery, but Amara filed that information away for later. Right now, he had to choose between trusting an unknown maid or watching his empire's biggest opportunity slip away. "Very well," Amara decided. "James, take Miss Hassan to prepare. Get her appropriate attire for the meeting. We proceed in 20 minutes." As Layla was whisked away by hotel staff, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that this desperate gamble was about to become something much more significant than a simple translation job. The hotel manager approached, nervously. "Sir, I must apologize again for the staff's inappropriate behavior. We'll ensure she's disciplined after." "You'll ensure she's treated with respect?" Amara cut him off sharply. "That woman might just save a deal worth more than this hotel. I suggest you recognize talent when you see it, regardless of what uniform it wears." 20 minutes later, Layla emerged transformed. Gone was the gray cleaning uniform, replaced by a professional navy blue blazer and modest dress that the hotel's boutique had provided. Her hijab was elegantly arranged, and she carried herself with the dignity of the scholar she truly was. For a moment, Amara saw her as she really was, not as circumstances had forced her to appear. The transformation was striking, but it was her eyes that captured his attention. Intelligent, determined, and carrying depths of story, he suddenly wanted to understand. The conference room at the Langham Hotel had been transformed into a battlefield of international commerce. Around the mahogany table sat some of Europe's most powerful energy executives. Heinrich Müller from German Petroleum Industries, his steel-gray eyes calculating behind wire-rimmed glasses. Marie Dubois from French Energy Consortium, elegant and sharp as a blade. And James Thornfield from British Continental Energy, whose family had controlled North Sea oil rights for 3 generations. Each had flown in specifically for this deal, and their time was worth millions per hour. As Amara entered with Layla beside him, the Europeans' expressions shifted from impatience to confusion. They had expected Professor Williams, the distinguished Oxford translator they'd worked with before. Instead, they saw a young woman in modest attire, her professional bearing somehow at odds with their preconceptions. "Gentlemen, madame," Amara began in English, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "I'd like to introduce Miss Layla Hassan, who will be handling our translation needs today." Heinrich Müller frowned, consulting his expensive Swiss watch. "Mr. Al-Rashid, with respect, we were expecting Professor Williams. This is a complex merger involving multiple regulatory frameworks across 3 countries. We need someone with proven expertise in international oil law." Layla stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. "Mr. Müller, I understand your concerns. I hold a master's degree from Oxford in linguistics with specialization in Middle Eastern legal frameworks. I've reviewed the preliminary documents and I'm familiar with the petroleum industry's specific terminology in both classical Arabic and modern legal English." She paused, then added in perfect German, "I also speak fluent German, which might help clarify any nuances in your preferred legal structures." The room fell silent. Marie Dubois leaned forward, intrigued despite herself. "Your German is excellent," she said in French. "But this isn't about language skills alone. These contracts involve delicate political considerations, cultural sensitivities that could impact government relations." Without missing a beat, Layla responded in flawless French. "Madame Dubois, I appreciate your concerns about cultural sensitivity. My background includes extensive study of Middle Eastern diplomatic history and European-Arab business relations. I understand that this merger isn't just commercial, it's geopolitical." James Thornfield's eyebrows rose. "And your experience with actual translation work in high-stakes negotiations?" "I've worked on diplomatic translations for the university's Middle Eastern Research Center," Layla replied smoothly. "While I understand this is my first commercial application at this scale, I assure you that the linguistic principles and cultural understanding remain consistent." Amara watched the Europeans' reactions carefully. He could see the wheels turning in their minds, curiosity fighting against prejudice and schedule pressure. "Shall we proceed?" he suggested. "Miss Hassan will translate the Arabic sections of the contract, and if any party finds the translation inadequate, we can pause to clarify." Heinrich pulled out the first document, a thick sheaf of papers written in ornate Arabic calligraphy. The classical Arabic used in Al-Rashid contracts was intentionally complex, a tradition that served both ceremonial and practical purposes. It weeded out casual competitors while demonstrating the family's deep cultural roots. As Heinrich began, reading the English summary, Layla listened intently, her mind automatically parsing the legal structures and identifying potential translation challenges. Section 1 addresses territorial drilling rights in the Mediterranean basin. Heinrich read. The Arabic text specifies exclusive access to underwater petroleum reserves within a 50-kilometer radius of the designated extraction points. Layla nodded and began translating the Arabic text aloud, her voice taking on the formal cadences appropriate to the classical dialect. But as she read, her expression shifted slightly. Something in the Arabic text didn't match Heinrich's English. Summary. "Excuse me," Layla interrupted politely. "I need to clarify something. The Arabic text doesn't specify exclusive access. It actually grants preferential consideration, which is significantly different in legal terms. Exclusive access would prevent any future partnerships, while preferential consideration allows for negotiated sharing agreements under specific circumstances." The room went dead silent. Heinrich checked his English notes, frowning. Marie Dubois pulled out her own copy, scanning quickly. Miss Hassan is correct, Marie said slowly. The English summary was imprecise. Amara felt a surge of respect for Layla's attention to detail. A lesser translator might have simply converted words without considering legal implications, but Layla had caught a nuance that could have caused problems later. Thank you, Miss Hassan, Amara said in Arabic. Your precision is exactly what we need. What happened next would test not just Layla's linguistic skills, but her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of international business politics. As the translation session progressed, Layla's expertise became undeniable. She didn't just convert words from Arabic to English. She explained cultural contexts, legal nuances, and historical precedents that illuminated the true meaning behind formal language. When the Arabic contract referenced brotherhood agreements, a traditional concept in Middle Eastern business, she explained to the Europeans that this implied long-term partnership obligations beyond simple commercial transactions. In Islamic business culture, Layla explained during a complex passage about profit sharing, the term risk doesn't simply mean profit. It encompasses the concept of blessed sustenance that should benefit the entire community. When Sheikh Al-Rashid's contracts use this term, they're committing to ensuring local communities benefit from the partnership. Heinrich Müller was taking detailed notes, clearly impressed by these cultural insights that no previous translator had provided. But it was during the environmental protection clauses that Layla's true value became apparent. The Arabic text contained references to ancient Islamic principles of environmental stewardship, concepts that had no direct English equivalent. The Arabic phrase Tawhid al-Ard literally means the unity of the earth, Layla explained. In Islamic environmental philosophy, this means all parties have a sacred obligation to preserve the natural world for future generations. Sheikh Al-Rashid isn't just agreeing to follow environmental regulations, he's making a spiritual commitment that supersedes legal requirements. Marie Dubois leaned back in her chair, clearly fascinated. This changes the entire framework of our environmental liability discussions. If the Al-Rashid family views environmental protection as a religious obligation rather than a legal requirement, it provides much stronger guarantees than any contract clause. Amara watched Layla with growing amazement. She wasn't just translating. She was building bridges between cultures, helping both sides understand not just what was being said, but why it mattered. During a break, as the Europeans stepped out to discuss the new information, Amara found himself alone with Layla for the first time. Where did you learn to navigate business negotiations like this? He asked in Arabic. This isn't just academic knowledge. Layla's expression grew more guarded. My late husband worked as a cultural liaison for international businesses in the Middle East. I learned by observing, by asking questions, by understanding that successful negotiations require more than language skills. Your husband, Amara said gently. What happened to him? Pain flickered across Layla's features. He was killed 2 years ago. A car bomb in Baghdad while he was working with an American petroleum company. He was just a translator. But sometimes, being in the wrong place at the wrong time is enough. The revelation hit Amara like a physical blow. This woman had lost her husband, had been forced to flee her life and start over as a cleaner, all while caring for a young daughter. I'm sorry, Amara said, and meant it. Why didn't you pursue translation work when you came to London? Layla's laugh was bitter. Have you tried finding professional work as a Middle Eastern woman with a young child and no local references? Even with my Oxford degree, potential employers saw only risk. A woman who might need time off for her child, a Muslim who might have divided loyalties, a widow who might be emotionally unstable. Cleaning pays immediately and asks no questions. Before Amara could respond, James entered urgently. Sir, we have a problem. I just received a call from Marcus Webb. He's flying in from Dubai and demands to join the negotiations. He says he has concerns about the translation accuracy. Amara's expression darkened immediately. Marcus Webb was his business partner and oldest friend. but also a man whose ambitions sometimes exceeded his judgment. Did you tell him about Miss Hassan? I mentioned we found an alternative translator. Sir, he was quite angry that you proceeded without consulting him. Layla sensed the tension immediately. If there are concerns about my qualifications, I can step aside. The last thing I want is to cause problems for your business relationships. No, Amara said firmly. You've proven your worth in the last 2 hours. We continue as planned. But even as he spoke, Amara knew Marcus's arrival would complicate everything. Marcus had strong opinions about maintaining traditional business practices and keeping outsiders at arm's length. The sight of a young woman translator handling their most sensitive negotiations would trigger all of Marcus's protective instincts about the Al-Rashid family's carefully guarded business secrets. When the Europeans returned, their mood had shifted, noticeably. They had clearly been discussing more than just contract terms. Sheikh Al-Rashid, Heinrich began formally. We've been reconsidering the scope of this partnership. Miss Hassan's cultural insights have revealed opportunities we hadn't considered. Instead of a simple merger, we'd like to propose a more comprehensive alliance that includes cultural exchange programs and community development initiatives. Amara blinked in surprise. This was far beyond what they had originally negotiated. Layla's translations hadn't just facilitated the deal, they had expanded it into something much more significant. But as he opened his mouth to respond, the conference room doors burst open. Marcus Webb strode in, his expensive suit immaculate despite the rush from the airport, his dark eyes immediately focusing on Layla with obvious suspicion. Amara, Marcus said in Arabic, his tone sharp with displeasure. We need to talk. Now. Marcus. Webb commanded attention the moment he entered the room. At 38, he was Amara's business partner, closest friend since university, and the only man who dared to challenge the Sheikh's decisions directly. His family had been connected to the Al-Rashid Empire for 2 generations, and he considered himself a guardian of their traditions and secrets. The Europeans clearly recognized his importance from Amara's reaction, and Layla instinctively stepped back, sensing the shift in power dynamics. Ladies and gentlemen, Amara said in English, his voice carefully controlled. May I introduce Marcus Webb, my partner and chief operating officer. Marcus, we're in the middle of finalizing the Continental Energy merger. Marcus's eyes swept the room, taking in the documents, the progress charts, and finally settling on Layla with undisguised skepticism. I can see that. I'm more concerned about who's been handling our confidential translations. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Heinrich Müller frowned at the interruption, while Marie Dubois watched the interaction with the keen interest of someone who understood boardroom politics. James Thornfield checked his watch pointedly, reminding everyone that time was money. Miss Hassan has been providing excellent translation services, Amara said firmly. Her work has actually expanded the scope of our potential partnership. Miss Hassan, Marcus repeated, his tone making her name sound like a question rather than an introduction. And her background verification, security clearance, references from previous clients? Each question was a verbal dagger, designed to highlight everything that made Layla's presence irregular. Marcus, Amara warned, his voice carrying an edge that made James nervously shuffle his papers. But Marcus pressed on, switching to rapid Arabic that he clearly didn't expect Layla to fully understand. Amara, have you lost your mind? We don't know anything about this woman. She could be working for our competitors, recording our negotiations, stealing our proprietary information. The Al-Rashid family doesn't share business secrets with random hotel employees. Layla's face remained composed, but her eyes flashed with barely controlled anger. She understood every word, every insinuation, every insult wrapped in Marcus's concern for security. Mr. Webb, Layla said in perfectly articulated Arabic, her formal tone dripping with dignity. I understand your concerns about security, but your assumptions about my character and qualifications are both unwarranted and unprofessional. I am not a random hotel employee who stumbled into this room. I am a qualified linguist who offered assistance during an emergency, and I have conducted myself with complete integrity throughout this process. Marcus's face reddened at being challenged, especially by someone he clearly considered beneath his notice. Integrity? He scoffed, continuing in Arabic. You're a cleaning woman pretending to be a scholar. This is exactly the kind of security breach that could destroy everything we've built. The Europeans were watching this exchange, with growing discomfort, understanding from tone and body language that something serious was happening even if they couldn't follow the Arabic. Enough, Amara commanded, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Marcus, Miss Hassan's qualifications are not in question. She has proven herself over the past 3 hours. If you have specific concerns about security protocols, we can discuss them privately after the negotiations conclude. But Marcus wasn't finished. I have information that changes everything, he said, pulling out his phone. I had our security team run a background check during my flight. Miss Hassan isn't just a random cleaner. Her late husband was Qasim Hassan, who worked for Meridian Petroleum's Baghdad operations. The silence that followed was deafening. Layla's face went pale as Marcus continued his verbal assault. Meridian Petroleum is owned by our biggest competitor, the Mansouri family. For all we know, she's been planted here to gather intelligence on our operations. Amara felt the ground shifting beneath him. The Mansouri family had been the Al-Rashid's primary rivals for decades, competing for the same markets, the same partnerships, the same political influence across the Middle East. That's impossible, Amara said, but doubt was creeping into his voice. She couldn't have known I would need a translator today. Couldn't she? Marcus pressed. Our negotiations with Continental have been in the news for weeks. Any intelligent spy would position themselves where they might gain access to our business. A cleaning job at our usual hotel would be perfect cover. Layla stood slowly, her dignity intact despite the accusations swirling around her. Sheikh Al-Rashid, she said quietly. I will not remain where my integrity is questioned, and my late husband's memory is used as a weapon against me. You have my translation work for the documents already reviewed. I suggest you find someone else to complete the process. She moved toward the door, but Amara's voice stopped her. Wait, he studied her face, searching for any sign of deception, any hint that Marcus's suspicions might be justified. What he saw was hurt, anger, and disappointment, but no guilt. Either Layla Hassan was an exceptional actress, or she was exactly what she appeared to be, a qualified woman trying to rebuild her life after tragedy. The question was whether Amara could afford to trust his instincts over his oldest friend's concerns. The next decision would determine not just the fate of the merger, but the direction of his own life. The tension in the conference room was suffocating as Amara weighed his options. On one side stood Marcus, his trusted partner whose loyalty had never been questioned, backed by decades of friendship and business success. On the other side was Layla, a woman he'd known for 3 hours, but who had already proven her competence and integrity in ways that impressed even skeptical European executives. Miss Hassan, Amara said carefully, before you leave, I need to understand something. Your husband worked for Meridian Petroleum. Did you know about my business relationships when you offered to translate? Layla turned back, her eyes bright with unshed tears but her voice steady. Sheikh Al-Rashid, my husband translated legal documents for dozens of companies across the Middle East. Meridian was one client among many. I offered to help because I heard a man in distress who needed assistance, not because I had any knowledge of your business rivalries. But you must have known about the Al-Rashid family's prominence in the oil industry, Marcus interjected, his tone accusatory. You can't claim complete ignorance. Of course I knew who Sheikh Al-Rashid was, Layla replied with dignity. Just as I know who the Mansouri family is, and the Al-Sabah family, and a dozen other prominent names in the petroleum industry. But knowing of someone's existence doesn't make me a spy for their competitors. Heinrich Miller cleared his throat uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take a break while you resolve this internal matter. But Marie Dubois leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. Actually, I'd like to hear Miss Hassan's response to these allegations. Her translations have been extraordinarily insightful, and her cultural explanations have added significant value to our understanding of the proposed partnership. Marcus's jaw tightened at the European support for Layla. Miss Dubois, with respect, you don't understand the complexities of Middle Eastern business relationships. Industrial espionage is a constant threat, and we cannot afford to be naive about security risks. And yet, James Thornfield observed dryly, Miss Hassan has been here for 3 hours translating documents that could be worth billions to your competitors. If she were truly a spy, wouldn't she have already accomplished her mission? The logic was undeniable, but Marcus wasn't ready to concede. Or perhaps she's establishing credibility before the real intelligence gathering begins. These could be preliminary negotiations designed to gain our trust for future operations. Amara watched Layla's reaction carefully. Instead of becoming defensive or angry, she pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her photos. Sheikh Al-Rashid, she said quietly, I'd like to show you something. She handed him the phone, displaying a photograph of a young girl, with bright eyes and Layla's gentle smile. This is my daughter, Noor. She's 6 years old and she's waiting for me to come home from work so we can practice her English homework together. She doesn't understand why we had to leave everything behind in Iraq, why we live in a tiny flat in East London, why Mommy has to clean hotel rooms instead of using her education. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. Every decision I make is about building a better future for her. Do you really think I would risk her security and safety by engaging in dangerous games of corporate espionage? I offered to translate because it was the right thing to do, and because £5,000 would pay our rent for 3 months, and buy Noor new school clothes. The raw honesty in her words hit everyone in the room like a physical force. This wasn't the calculated response of a trained spy. This was a mother's fierce protection of her child's future. Marcus, however, remained unconvinced. Emotional appeals don't change security concerns, he said coldly. The fact remains that she has connections to our competitors. Then verify my story, Layla challenged, her voice gaining strength. Call Oxford University and confirm my academic records. Contact the hotel and ask how long I've been employed here. Speak with my neighbors, my daughter's teachers, anyone who knows my real life. But don't insult my integrity based on guilt by association with companies my dead husband worked for. Amara felt something shift inside him as he watched Layla defend herself with such dignity despite Marcus's attacks. This woman had already endured the loss of her husband, the displacement from her homeland, and the humiliation of working beneath her qualifications. Now she was being accused of treason based on circumstances completely beyond her control. Marcus, Amara said finally, his decision crystallizing. Your concerns are noted, but they're overruled. Miss Hassan will continue as our translator. Marcus's face darkened with anger and disbelief. Amara, you're making a mistake that could cost us everything. The only mistake, Amara replied firmly, would be allowing paranoia to override good judgment and basic human decency. But as Marcus stormed out of the conference room, his parting words carried an ominous warning. Don't say I didn't warn you when this decision comes back to destroy everything you've built. Layla sank into her chair, the emotional toll of the confrontation finally showing. She had won this battle, but everyone in the room sensed that the war was far from over. The remainder of the negotiation session proceeded with remarkable success, but the atmosphere had been forever changed by Marcus's dramatic exit. The European executives, perhaps feeling sympathy for Layla after witnessing her dignified defense, seemed more receptive to compromise and creative solutions. By 6 p.m., they had reached a preliminary agreement that exceeded everyone's initial expectations. This has been most productive, Heinrich Muller said as they prepared to adjourn. Miss Hassan, your cultural insights have been invaluable. I hope we'll have the opportunity to work together again in the future. Layla managed a grateful smile despite her emotional exhaustion. Thank you, Mr. Muller. I'm honored to have been part of such important negotiations. As the Europeans departed with promises to have final contracts prepared by the following week, Amara found himself alone with Layla for the first time since Marcus's accusations. The luxury conference room suddenly felt intimate and charged with unspoken questions. I owe you an apology, Amara said quietly. Marcus was out of line. and I should have stopped him sooner. You don't owe me anything, Layla replied, gathering the translated documents with practiced efficiency. I understand his concerns even if I don't appreciate his methods. Protecting your family's business interests is his responsibility. Her professionalism in the face of such treatment only increased Amara's admiration for her character. Miss Hassan, Amara began, then stopped himself. Layla, may I call you Layla? At her nod, he continued. I'd like to offer you a position, not just as a translator but as a cultural liaison for our European operations. Your insights today were remarkable, and I believe you could add tremendous value to our international partnerships. Layla's eyes widened in surprise. Sheikh Al-Rashid, that's incredibly generous, but I'm not sure it would be wise. Your partner clearly sees me as a threat, and I don't want to cause division in your organization. Marcus's concerns are unfounded, Amara said firmly, and frankly, his behavior today was unacceptable. The decision is mine to make, and I'm making it based on merit and results. Before Layla could respond, Amara's phone buzzed with an urgent message from James. The text was brief but alarming. Marcus called emergency board meeting in Dubai for tomorrow. Says you're compromised by security breach. Family members flying. In tonight. Amara's expression darkened as he read the message. Marcus wasn't just expressing concerns. He was actively working to undermine Amara's authority and decision-making. Is everything all right? Layla asked, noticing his sudden tension. Amara hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. Marcus has called an emergency board meeting to challenge my judgment about today's events. He's essentially accusing me of being compromised by... He paused, choosing his words carefully. By allowing emotions to override business judgment. Layla understood immediately. He thinks your decision to trust me was based on personal feelings rather than professional assessment. Something like that, Amara confirmed grimly. The Al-Rashid family takes business security very seriously. If Marcus convinces them that I've been reckless, it could undermine my authority as CEO, then I'll decline your job offer, Layla said quickly. I won't be responsible for causing problems between you and your family. No, Amara said with surprising intensity. I won't let Marcus's paranoia dictate my decisions. You earned that position through merit. If the family can't see that, then perhaps it's time for some changes in how we operate. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the conference room door. James entered with obvious reluctance, followed by an unexpected visitor. Sir, there's someone here to see Miss Hassan. She says it's urgent. Behind James stood a woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed, but with worry lines etched around her eyes. Layla's face went pale as she recognized the visitor. Aunt Fatima, Layla gasped, rising quickly. What are you doing here? Is Noor all right? The older woman embraced Layla briefly, then looked around the luxurious conference room with obvious confusion. Noor is fine, but I had to come. There are men asking questions about you in the neighborhood. They came to the apartment building showing photographs, asking about your work, your connections, your late husband's business. Amara felt ice forming in his stomach. What kind of men? He asked in Arabic. Fatima looked uncertain about speaking to such an obviously powerful man, but answered. They said they were conducting security background checks for employment purposes. They had official-looking credentials, but something about them felt wrong. They were too interested in details, about Qasim's work, about why Layla really came to London. Did they speak to Noor? Layla asked, her voice tight with maternal concern. No, thank God, she was at school. But Layla, I think you should be very careful. These weren't ordinary background investigators. They knew things about Qasim's death that never made the news reports. The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. Someone was conducting unauthorized surveillance on Layla, digging into details about her husband's death that should have been classified information. Either Marcus had gone far beyond normal background checks, or there were other players involved in this situation. What was becoming clear was that Layla Hassan was at the center of something much more dangerous than a simple business rivalry. The emergency meeting at Amara's London penthouse that evening felt more like a war council than a business discussion. Present were Amara, his head of security Rahman Al-Mansouri, his legal counsel David Pierce, and via secure video link, his brother Khalil from Dubai. The modern apartment's floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the Thames, but nobody was admiring the scenery. The surveillance team Marcus hired isn't one of our usual security contractors, Rahman reported, his weathered face grim with concern. They're ex-military, specialized in intelligence operations, far more sophisticated than needed for a simple background check. David Pierce, a sharp British lawyer who'd represented the Al-Rashid family for 15 years, leaned forward intently. More concerning is that they seem to have access to classified information about Qasim Hassan's death. That suggests either government connections or very high-level corporate espionage capabilities. Khalil's voice crackled through the secure connection from Dubai. Brother, I've been making inquiries about the Mansouri family's recent activities. There are rumors they're planning something significant, possibly related to the Continental Energy deal. If they've somehow orchestrated this situation with the translator. He didn't need to finish the thought. If the Mansouri family had planted Layla to gather intelligence, or worse, if they were now using her as leverage against Amara, the implications were staggering. There's something else, Rahman added reluctantly. The men questioning Layla's neighbors weren't just asking about her background. They were specifically interested in her daughter's school schedule, her daily routines, the security at their apartment building. A cold silence filled the room as the implications sank in. This wasn't just corporate espionage. Someone was conducting surveillance that could be used for intimidation or worse. Amara stood abruptly, pacing to the window. They're threatening a child to get to me, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Whoever is behind this has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. David Pierce cleared his throat. Sheikh Al-Rashid, we need to consider the possibility that Miss Hassan herself might be in danger. If she's genuinely innocent and someone is using her as a pawn, her safety could be at risk. Or, Khalil's voice interjected from Dubai, she could be playing a very sophisticated game. The timing of her appearance, the perfect qualifications, the emotional story about her daughter, it could all be carefully orchestrated. Rahman nodded grimly. I've seen operations like this before. Create a seemingly innocent contact, build trust through competence and sympathy, then leverage that trust for intelligence gathering or manipulation. Amara felt torn between his growing instincts about Layla's genuine character and the logical security concerns his team was raising. Everything about her seemed authentic. Her knowledge, her reactions, her protective instincts toward her daughter. But he'd built his empire by trusting facts over feelings, and the facts were increasingly troubling. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Marcus sent from Dubai. Board meeting moved to tomorrow 9 a.m. London time. Family flying in tonight. They know about the woman and they're not happy. Last chance to fix this before it destroys everything. Amara showed the message to his team, watching their expressions grow more serious. Sir, Rahman said carefully, I recommend we place Miss Hassan and her daughter under protective surveillance. If she's innocent, we protect potential victims. If she's not, we monitor potential threats. And if the board demands I cut all ties with her? Amara asked. Then you follow family wishes, David Pierce replied pragmatically. The Al-Rashid empire is bigger than any individual relationship. But even as his advisors spoke, Amara's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Layla's dignified response to Marcus's accusations, her fierce protection of her daughter's future, the way she'd handled complex negotiations with grace under pressure. His instincts, honed by decades of reading people and situations, told him she was genuine. The question was whether he was willing to risk everything he'd built on those instincts. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Rahman answered, speaking quietly to whoever was outside before returning with a concerned expression. Sir, there's a woman downstairs asking to see you. She says she's Layla Hassan's sister-in-law and it's about Noor's safety. Amara exchanged glances with his team. Send her up, he decided. But Rahman, stay close. The woman who entered 5 minutes later was clearly distressed, her hijab slightly askew, her eyes red from crying. She looked around the luxurious penthouse, nervously before focusing on Amara. Sheikh Al-Rashid, I am Samira Hassan, Qasim's sister. Layla doesn't know I'm here, but I had to come. What's wrong? Amara asked gently, gesturing for her to sit. It's about the men who came asking questions today. After they left, I remembered something important about my brother's death. Something Layla doesn't know, something that might explain why people are suddenly interested in her. The room fell silent, everyone understanding that they were about to hear information that could change everything. Samira took a shaky breath before continuing. Before Qasim died, he called me. He was frightened, said he'd discovered something at work that could get him killed. He'd been translating documents for Meridian Petroleum, but also secretly for another company that was investigating Meridian's operations. Amara felt his pulse quicken. What kind of investigation? Corruption? Illegal weapons sales? Using oil operations as cover for arms trafficking to terrorist groups? Qasim had proof, documents he'd translated that showed high-level executives were involved. He was planning to turn the evidence over to international authorities when he was killed. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. If Qasim Hassan had been murdered for uncovering corruption at Meridian Petroleum, and if Layla was now connected to the Al-Rashid family, she could be in serious danger from the same people who had killed her husband. But it also raised new questions about whether Layla knew about her husband's discoveries and whether her appearance at the hotel had been as coincidental as it seemed. Does Layla know any of this? Rahman asked urgently. Samira shook her head. Qasim made me promise never to tell her. He said the less she knew, the safer she'd be, but if these men are investigating her now... Her voice trailed off as the implications became clear. Amara made a decision that would change everything. Rahman, I want protection details on both Layla and her daughter immediately. David, start investigating connections between Meridian, Petroleum and the Mansouri family. And someone get me Marcus on the phone. It's time we had a very serious conversation about who's really behind this surveillance operation. As his team sprang into action, Amara stared out at the London skyline, understanding that what had started as a simple business translation had evolved into something far more dangerous and complex than anyone had anticipated. The Al-Rashid family's London offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming Canary Wharf tower, and by 8 a.m. the next morning, they had been transformed into a fortress of Middle Eastern business power. Amara's uncle, Sheikh Hassan Al-Rashid, had flown in from Dubai overnight along with 2 cousins who served on the company's board of directors. The family patriarch, 72-year-old Sheikh Amara Al-Rashid, participated via secure video conference from the family compound in Abu Dhabi. Marcus had arrived early, his confidence restored by family support and armed with a comprehensive dossier on Layla Hassan that he'd compiled during the night. As Amara entered the boardroom, he could feel the weight of generational expectation and traditional caution pressing down on him like a physical force. Amara, his uncle Hassan began without preamble, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had helped build the Al-Rashid empire. We need to discuss your judgment regarding this translator situation. Marcus has raised serious concerns about security breaches and emotional decision-making. The formal Arabic phrasing made it clear this was not a friendly family discussion, but an official board inquiry into Amara's leadership. Sheikh Omar's weathered face filled the video screen, his eyes sharp despite his age. Grandson, in 70 years of business, I have learned that our greatest vulnerabilities come not from obvious enemies, but from those who appeal to our better nature. Tell me about this woman who has so dramatically appeared in our operations. Amara had prepared for this moment, but facing 3 generations of family scrutiny was more challenging than any business negotiation. Grandfather, Layla Hassan is a qualified linguist who provided exceptional translation services during a crisis. Her work not only saved the Continental Energy deal, but expanded it beyond our original expectations. Marcus leaned forward, spreading documents across the table. With respect, that's an incomplete picture. Miss Hassan's husband worked for Meridian Petroleum, our primary competitor. She has no verifiable references in London, no security clearance, and her presence at exactly the right moment strains credibility. His cousin Ahmad nodded in agreement. Amara, you've always been thorough about security protocols. Why abandon them now? Before Amara could respond, David Pierce entered the boardroom with Rahman al-Mansouri, both carrying urgent expressions and additional files. Sheikh Al-Rashid, we have new information that changes the situation significantly. Rahman approached the table, his security background evident in his systematic presentation style. We've completed our investigation into the surveillance operation targeting Miss Hassan. The team wasn't hired by Mr. Webb. Marcus's confident expression flickered slightly. What do you mean? I authorize standard background verification. Standard background checks don't involve ex-military surveillance specialists with classified intelligence access, Rahman replied evenly. The team investigating Miss Hassan was hired by Meridian Petroleum, specifically by executives connected to the Mansouri family. The room fell silent as the implications registered. Sheikh Hassan leaned back in his chair, his business instincts immediately recognizing the shift in dynamics. You're saying our competitors are conducting surveillance on someone connected to our operations? More than that, David Pierce added, opening his legal files. We've discovered that Qasim Hassan, Miss Hassan's late husband, was killed because he uncovered evidence of weapons trafficking and terrorist financing within Meridian's operations. He was preparing to turn that evidence over to international authorities when he was murdered. Sheikh Omar's image leaned forward on the video screen. And his wife? What does she know? According to his sister, nothing, Rahman reported. Qasim deliberately kept Layla ignorant of his discoveries to protect her. But if Meridian executives believe she might have inherited evidence or knowledge of their illegal activities, they would want to neutralize her as a potential threat, Sheikh Hassan finished grimly. Or use her to gather intelligence on our operations, since she's now connected to our family. Marcus's face had gone pale as he realized the implications of his security concerns. Are you saying Layla Hassan isn't a spy for our competitors, but potentially a target of theirs? We're saying, Amara interjected, finding his voice again, that an innocent woman and her 6-year-old daughter are in danger because of their late husband and father's courage in exposing terrorism financing. And our response has been to treat her as a security threat rather than protecting someone who needs our help. The moral dimension of the situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. These men had built their empire on traditional values of honor, protection of the innocent, and standing against injustice. The possibility that they had been attacking a victim rather than defending against a threat challenged everything they claimed to represent. Sheikh Omar's voice crackled through the speakers with the weight of final authority. Rahman, what is the current threat level to Miss Hassan and her daughter? Hi, sir. Meridian has resources and motivation to eliminate potential witnesses. The surveillance operation suggests they're preparing for more direct action. Then we protect them, the patriarch declared simply. The Al-Rashid family does not abandon innocent people to our enemies, regardless of how they came into our lives. His nephew Hassan nodded in agreement. Grandfather is right. Honor demands we shield this woman and her child from those who would harm them for her husband's righteousness. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, realizing his opposition to Layla had placed him on the wrong side of family values. Of course, if she's truly innocent and in danger, we should help. But Amara, you have to admit that your decision-making about her has been unusually personal. All eyes turned to Amara, and he realized this was the moment of truth. Not just about Layla's safety, but about his own feelings and motivations. The family was giving him permission to protect her, but they also wanted assurance that his judgment wasn't compromised by romantic attraction. Yes, Amara said quietly. My feelings about Layla Hassan are personal. She's an extraordinary woman who has shown grace under pressure, intelligence, dignity, and fierce protection of her child, despite facing impossible circumstances. If developing respect and affection for such a person compromises my judgment, then perhaps my judgment needed to be compromised. The admission hung in the air, changing the entire dynamic of the meeting. this was no longer about business security. It was about a man's heart and a family's honor. And in that moment, everyone in the room understood that Amara Al-Rashid was prepared to risk everything to protect the woman who had unknowingly walked into his life and changed it forever. The Al-Rashid family safe house in Chelsea was a 4-story, Georgian townhouse that appeared unremarkable from the outside, but contained state-of-the-art security systems and accommodations fit for visiting royalty. By noon that same day, Layla and 6-year-old Noor had been quietly relocated there under the protection of Rahman's security team, though neither fully understood the extent of the danger they faced. Layla sat in the elegant sitting room, watching her daughter explore the house with wide-eyed wonder. Noor had never seen rooms this beautiful, with their silk wallpaper, crystal chandeliers, and priceless Persian rugs. To a 6-year-old who had been living in a cramped East London flat, the safe house seemed like a fairy tale palace. "Mama," Noor whispered in Arabic, tugging on Layla's modest dress. "Are we really allowed to stay here? It's so fancy, like the pictures in my princess books." Layla smoothed her daughter's dark hair, her heart aching at the innocence in those bright eyes. "Yes, Habibti, we are safe here. Sheikh Al-Rashid is a kind man who wants to make sure nothing bad happens to us." But even as she spoke the reassuring words, Layla struggled with the unreality of her situation. 12 hours ago, she had been a hotel cleaner, living paycheck to paycheck. Now she was under the protection of one of the world's most powerful families, staying in luxury that exceeded anything she had experienced even during her university years. The transformation felt dreamlike and slightly terrifying. Rahman entered the sitting room, his professional demeanor softened by obvious affection for children. "Miss Hassan, Sheikh Al-Rashid would like to speak with you privately. There are some things you need to understand about your situation." He turned to Noor with a gentle smile. "Little princess, would you like to see the library upstairs? There are books in Arabic and English, and I think you might find some stories about real princesses from our homeland." As Noor bounded upstairs, with excitement, Rahman's expression grew serious. "Miss Hassan, what I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear, but you need to understand why you're here." Over the next 30 minutes, Rahman explained everything. Qasim's discovery of the weapons trafficking, his murder to prevent him from exposing the truth, and the current surveillance operation that suggested Meridian executives still considered Layla a potential threat. Layla listened in stunned silence, her hands trembling as the pieces fell into place. "You're telling me that Qasim was killed not by random terrorists but by the very company he worked for, because he discovered they were supporting terrorism?" "I'm afraid so," Rahman confirmed gently. "And we believe they're now watching you, because they're concerned about what he might have told you before his death." "But he never told me anything," Layla protested, tears streaming down her face. "We talked about normal things, his work schedule, dinner plans, Noor's school progress. He never mentioned discovering anything dangerous." "That may have saved your life," Rahman observed. "If they believed you knew their secrets, you would have been eliminated already. But recent events, your connection to Sheikh Al-Rashid, your presence at high-level business negotiations, have made them nervous about your potential knowledge and access." The full weight of her situation crashed over Layla like a tsunami. Not only had she lost her husband to corporate murder, but she and her daughter had been living under a shadow of potential danger for 2 years without knowing it. Her decision to offer translation services, meant as a simple act of kindness and financial necessity, had inadvertently placed them both in the crosshairs of international criminals. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do Noor and I have to live in hiding forever? Do we have to leave London?" Before Rahman could answer, the sitting room door opened and Amara entered, his face etched with concern and determination. He had changed from his business suit into casual clothes, making him appear more approachable, more human. "Layla," he said softly, sitting across from her with careful respect for propriety, "I want you to know that my family has pledged our full protection to you and Noor. Whatever it takes, for as long as necessary, you will be safe." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, but Layla felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. Sheikh Al-Rashid, I can't ask you to risk your family's safety for people you barely know. The translation job was supposed to be a simple favor, not a lifetime commitment. You didn't ask, Amara replied firmly. We offered. And it's not charity, Layla. Your husband died trying to expose terrorists who threaten innocent people around the world. Protecting his family isn't just the right thing to do, it's an honor. Noor's laughter drifted down from the library upstairs, a sound of pure joy that reminded everyone what they were fighting to preserve. She doesn't understand any of this, Layla said, listening to her daughter's happiness. How do I explain to a 6-year-old that we can't go home because bad people might hurt us? You don't have to explain anything right now, Amara said gently. Let her enjoy being a child for as long as possible. Meanwhile, we'll work to eliminate the threat permanently. There was something in his tone, a steel beneath the gentleness that suggested the Al-Rashid family's response to threats against innocent people would be swift and decisive. There's something else, Rahman added. We've discovered that Marcus Webb has been in contact with Meridian executives. We're not certain of his motivations yet, but it appears his opposition to Miss Hassan may have been influenced by outside pressure. The betrayal hit Amara visibly, his jaw tightening as he processed the implications of his oldest friend's disloyalty. As the afternoon sun streamed through the safe house windows, casting golden light across the elegant room, Layla realized that her simple act of offering translation help had set in motion events that would change not just her life, but the lives of everyone around her. The question now was whether they would all survive the storm that was coming. That evening, as London's skyline glittered beyond the safe house windows, Amara found Layla in the library reading to Noor before bedtime. The sight of mother and daughter curled together on the antique sofa, sharing a story about brave princesses and noble knights, struck him with unexpected emotional force. This was what family looked like. Quiet moments of love and protection, simple rituals that created security in an uncertain world. Once upon a time, Layla read in softly accented English, there was a princess who had to leave her beautiful castle because bad people wanted to hurt her father, the king. But a brave prince found her and promised that his castle would always be her home, and that no one would ever hurt her again. Noor's eyes were growing heavy, but she listened intently to every word. Mama, Noor murmured sleepily. Are we like the princess in the story? Is Sheikh Amara like the brave prince? Layla's breath caught, her eyes meeting Amara's across the room. The innocent question cut straight to the heart of their complicated situation. Yes, Habibti, Layla whispered. Sheikh Amara is very brave, and he's promised to keep us safe. As Noor drifted off to sleep, Amara approached quietly. Would you like me to carry her to her room? He offered. The tender way he lifted the sleeping child, his careful attention to her comfort, revealed a side of him that had nothing to do with business empires or family honor. This was simply a man being gentle with a vulnerable child, and it made Layla's heart skip in ways she hadn't felt since Qasim's death. After settling Noor in the beautifully appointed children's room, they found themselves alone in the hallway, the intimacy of the shared moment hanging between them like a question neither was ready to voice. Thank you, Layla said softly. For everything. I know this situation is complicated, and I know your family must have concerns about getting involved with someone like me. Someone like you? Amara repeated, his voice puzzled. An educated, principled woman who has shown extraordinary courage in impossible circumstances? You're right. My family does have concerns about someone like you. He paused, a slight smile playing at his lips. They're concerned that I might not be worthy of someone so remarkable. The compliment sent warmth flooding through Layla's chest, but it also triggered waves of guilt and confusion. Sheikh Al-Rashid. Amara, he corrected gently. When it's just us, please call me Amara. Amara, she repeated, the name feeling strange and intimate on her tongue. I need you to understand something. I'm grateful beyond words for your protection, but I can't let you think that my gratitude could become something more. My heart still belongs to my husband's memory. Amara nodded with understanding that surprised her. Layla, I would never ask you to abandon Qasim's memory or pretend your love for him didn't exist. That love is part of what makes you who you are. Part of what I... He stopped himself, realizing he was about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Part of what you what? Layla asked softly, though she wasn't sure she was ready for his answer. Part of what I admire about you, Amara finished carefully. Your loyalty, your devotion to family, your ability to honor the past while still building a future for Noor. These aren't obstacles to caring about you. They're reasons to respect you even more. Before Layla could respond, Rahman appeared in the hallway with an urgent expression. Sir, we have a situation. Marcus Webb is downstairs demanding to see you. He says it's about Miss Hassan's safety, and he has information that can't wait until morning. Amara's expression hardened immediately. After learning about Marcus's contact with Meridian executives, any information from his former friend would be viewed with deep suspicion. Should I disappear while you talk to him? Layla asked, understanding the delicacy of the situation. No, Amara decided. If this concerns your safety, you have a right to hear it directly. Rahman, bring him to the study, but maintain security protocols. As they prepared to face whatever Marcus had come to reveal, Amara found himself protective instincts regarding Layla intensifying. Whatever game his former friend was playing, it would not be allowed to endanger the woman and child he had sworn to protect. The study was a masculine room of dark wood and leather, lined with books in Arabic, English, and French. When Marcus entered, his usual confident demeanor was replaced by something that looked remarkably like fear. His expensive suit was rumpled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes kept darting toward the windows as if he expected to see threats lurking in the London darkness. Amara, thank God you're here, Marcus began without preamble. I've made a terrible mistake, and now we're all in danger because of it. He looked at Layla with what appeared to be genuine regret. Miss Hassan, I owe you an apology. My concerns about your background led me to contact some questionable sources for information. What kind of sources? Rahman asked sharply, his security instincts fully engaged. Marcus swallowed hard before answering. Meridian Petroleum executives. I thought they might have insights about your husband's work, about whether you posed any security risks to our operations. I never imagined they would see our inquiry as an opportunity to gather intelligence about the Al-Rashid family's activities. The admission hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Marcus had essentially confirmed that his opposition to Layla had been used by their enemies to penetrate the Al-Rashid family's security. Whether through stupidity or malice, he had opened a door that should have remained locked. What exactly did you tell them? Amara demanded, his voice deadly quiet. Everything, Marcus admitted miserably. The details of the Continental Energy deal, your personal involvement with Miss Hassan, the location of this safe house. Amara, they played me perfectly. They made me believe I was protecting you when I was actually giving them everything they needed to destroy us all. The magnitude of the betrayal was staggering, but what terrified Amara most was the immediate implication. If Meridian knew about the safe house, then Layla and Noor were no longer protected. They were sitting targets in what they had believed to be an impregnable fortress. The next few hours unfolded with the precision of a military operation as the Al-Rashid security team mobilized to relocate Layla and Noor to a new safe location. Rahman coordinated with his contacts in British intelligence while additional security personnel surrounded the Chelsea townhouse to cover their departure. The urgency was palpable. Everyone understood that Meridian's knowledge of their location meant an attack could come at any moment. Layla packed their few belongings with the efficiency of someone who had learned to live with the possibility of sudden displacement. Noor, awakened from sleep and confused by the midnight activity, clung to her mother with the intuitive fear of a child who sensed danger even if she couldn't understand it. Mama, why do we have to leave the pretty house? She asked in Arabic, her small voice trembling. We're going on another adventure, Habibti, Layla replied, forcing calmness into her voice even as her hands shook. Sheikh Amara has found us an even safer place to stay. The lie felt bitter on her tongue, But protecting her daughter's innocence was more important than honesty about their terrifying reality. Amara appeared in the doorway, having changed into dark tactical clothing that made him look more like a soldier than a billionaire. "The new location is ready," he reported quietly. "It's a private estate in the Cotswolds, completely off the grid. My grandfather used it during the troubles in the 1980s. He knelt down to Noor's level, his voice gentle despite the urgency of their situation. "Princess Noor, would you like to see a real castle, with towers and gardens and maybe even some horses?" The child's eyes brightened slightly at the prospect of horses, and Layla felt grateful for Amara's instinctive understanding of how to comfort a frightened child. As they prepared to leave, Rahman pulled Amara aside for a private briefing. "Sir, our intelligence contacts have confirmed that Meridian has contracted a professional elimination team. They're not just planning surveillance, they're planning termination." The words hit Amara like physical blows. Professional killers were hunting the woman and child he had sworn to protect. The scope of the threat had escalated beyond corporate espionage into something resembling an international conspiracy. "How much time do we have?" "Unknown, sir. Could be hours, could be days. But we need to assume they're moving against us, tonight." As they prepared to leave through the townhouse's secured garage, Marcus approached Layla with obvious remorse. "Miss Hassan, I know my apology is worthless, but I need you to understand that I never intended for any of this to happen. I thought I was protecting Amara, protecting our business. I never imagined they would use my concerns to target you and your daughter." Layla studied the man who had inadvertently placed her family in mortal danger. She could see genuine regret in his eyes, but she could also see the weakness that had made him vulnerable to manipulation. "Mr. Webb," she said quietly, "the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Your desire to protect Sheikh Amara is admirable, but your methods have potentially cost innocent lives." Before Marcus could respond, the armored Mercedes was ready. Rahman had arranged for 3 identical vehicles to leave simultaneously from different exits, making it impossible for potential attackers to know which car contained their actual targets. As they settled into the back seat with Noor curled between them, Amara took Layla's hand in a gesture of comfort and solidarity. "I promise you," he said quietly as London's lights faded behind them, "this will not be how your story ends. We will find whoever is responsible for Qasim's death, for the threats against you and Noor, and we will ensure they can never hurt your family again." The determination in his voice was absolute, but Layla could see the cost of this protection in the lines of stress around his eyes. "Amara," she said softly, careful not to wake the sleeping child between them. "You've already done more than anyone could ask. If protecting us cost you your business, your family relationships, your safety, then that's a price I'm willing to pay," he interrupted firmly. "Some things matter more than money or convenience. Some people are worth any risk." The words hung between them in the darkness of the speeding car, carrying implications that went far beyond the immediate crisis. As they drove through the night toward an uncertain future, both understood that whatever happened next would determine not just their survival, but the shape of their lives forever. The translation job that had brought them together had evolved into something neither had anticipated. A bond forged in danger, tested by betrayal, and strengthened by the shared determination to protect what mattered most. Behind them, London receded into memory. Ahead lay the ancient countryside of England, where a Cotswolds estate would either provide the sanctuary they desperately needed or become the final battlefield in a war neither had chosen, but both were, now committed to fight. The Thornfield estate emerged from the morning mist like something from a Gothic novel, a genuine 14th century castle that had been lovingly restored and modernized while maintaining its medieval grandeur. As their convoy passed through the wrought iron gates and up the tree-lined drive, Noor pressed her face to the window with wonder that temporarily erased the fear of their midnight flight. "Mama, look, it really is a castle," she exclaimed in Arabic, pointing to the stone towers and crenellated walls. "Are there really horses, and can we explore the towers?" Her innocent excitement was a balm to everyone's frayed nerves, reminding them that beyond the danger and conspiracy, They were protecting something precious and irreplaceable, a child's capacity for joy. Rahman had arrived ahead of them to coordinate security with the estate's existing systems. The property belonged to Lord Edward Thornfield, a British aristocrat who had been the Al-Rashid family's friend and business partner for decades. More importantly, Thornfield was a former SAS colonel whose estate was equipped with military-grade security systems, disguised as quaint country amenities. "Welcome to Thornfield," Lord Edward greeted them personally, his weathered face kind, but his eyes sharp with the alertness of a man who had spent his military career in dangerous places. At 70, he moved with the controlled grace of someone still capable of lethal action if necessary. "Miss Hassan, young Noor, please consider this your home for as long as needed. The castle has weathered many storms over 7 centuries. It will weather this one too." The interior of the castle was a masterful blend of ancient architecture and modern comfort. Tapestries hung beside state-of-the-art security monitors, and suits of medieval armor stood guard next to contemporary communication equipment. Noor's room was in one of the towers, furnished like a fairy tale princess's chamber, but equipped with reinforced windows and multiple escape routes that appeared to be decorative architectural features. As Noor explored her new temporary home with the enthusiasm of a child on the world's most elaborate playground, Layla found herself alone with Amara in the castle's great hall. Massive stone fireplaces dominated both ends of the room, and afternoon, sunlight streamed through stained glass windows that had witnessed centuries of human drama. "I feel like I'm living in someone else's life," Layla confessed, running her fingers along the carved stone mantelpiece. 3 days ago I was cleaning hotel rooms and worrying about paying rent. Now I'm hiding in a medieval castle because international terrorists want to kill me and my daughter. It's so surreal I sometimes wonder if I'm dreaming. Amara watched her with growing tenderness as she struggled to process the magnitude of how dramatically her world had changed. "When I was a child," he said quietly, "my grandfather told me that Allah sometimes puts us exactly where we need to be, even when we can't understand why. Perhaps your appearance at the hotel wasn't coincidence. Perhaps it was destiny." "Destiny?" Layla repeated, turning to face him fully. "You think it was destiny that led me to offer translation services and accidentally stumble into a web of corporate conspiracy and international terrorism?" Her tone was skeptical, but not dismissive. The events of the past few days had challenged her understanding of coincidence and fate. "I think," Amara replied carefully, "that it was destiny that brought together a woman who needed protection and a man who needed to remember what truly matters in life. Everything else, the business deals, the family politics, even the danger, is just the circumstances that made our meeting possible." Before Layla could respond to this profound admission, Rahman entered the great hall with Lord Edward, both men carrying serious expressions and classified documents. "Sir, we've received intelligence that changes everything," Rahman announced. "British MI6 has been tracking Meridian's weapons trafficking operation for 2 years. They want to coordinate with us to bring down the entire network." Lord Edward spread photographs and documents across the massive oak table that dominated the center of the hall. "Miss Hassan, your husband was much more than a translator. He was working undercover for British intelligence, gathering evidence on Meridian's illegal activities. His murder wasn't just about silencing a witness, it was about eliminating a British agent who had penetrated their operation." The revelation hit Layla like a physical blow. Everything she thought she knew about Qasim's work, about their life in Iraq, about the reasons for his death had been incomplete. "He was a spy?" she whispered, sinking into one of the medieval chairs surrounding the table. "All those times he traveled for translation work, he was actually conducting intelligence operations?" "I'm afraid so," Lord Edward confirmed gently. "And the evidence he gathered before his death is what Meridian has been trying to retrieve or destroy. They believe he passed classified information to you before he died." Rahman added another document to the spread on the table. "The good news is that MI6 wants to use this situation to complete Qasim's mission. If we can provide them with the evidence they need, Meridian's executives will be arrested, and the threat to your family will be eliminated permanently." "But we don't have any evidence," Layla protested. Qasim never gave me classified documents or told me about secret operations. Amara studied the intelligence photographs, his business mind immediately grasping the strategic implications. What if the evidence isn't something physical? What if it's something else Qasim left behind, something only you would understand? As the pieces of a complex puzzle began falling into place, everyone in the room realized they were no longer just hiding from danger. They were about to become active participants in an international intelligence operation that would either destroy their enemies forever or get them all killed in the attempt. The question was whether Layla held the key to completing her murdered husband's final mission, and whether she was prepared to risk everything to see justice done. The afternoon sun slanted through the stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the ancient stone floor as four people huddled around a table, planning to take on one of the world's most dangerous criminal organizations. In that moment, the medieval Great Hall became a war room where the past and present collided, where a widow's grief would either become the weapon that destroyed her husband's killers or the catalyst for her own destruction. The breakthrough came at midnight in the quiet sanctuary of Noor's tower room, where Layla sat reading her daughter bedtime stories from a collection of Arabic fairy tales. As she opened the familiar book, one of the few possessions they had managed to bring from their London flat, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor like a dying butterfly. Layla's breath caught as she recognized Qasim's handwriting on the fragment. But these weren't loving words or family reminders. Instead, she found a series of numbers and letters that meant nothing to her. TR72341N, LX988.15W, Desert Rose Blooms at Midnight. Her hands trembled as she stared at the cryptic message, understanding instinctively that this was what everyone had been searching for. She tucked Noor under the embroidered coverlet and kissed her daughter's forehead before hurrying downstairs to find Amara and the others. The castle's stone corridors echoed with her footsteps as she navigated by moonlight toward the Great Hall, where she could see the warm glow of firelight and hear the murmur of serious conversation. "I found something," she announced breathlessly as she entered the room, holding out the paper with shaking hands. It was hidden in Noor's storybook, the one Qasim always read to her before bed. Rahman immediately activated a secure communication device while Lord Edward examined the writing under a magnifying glass. "These look like coordinates," Lord Edward observed, his military experience evident in his systematic analysis. "Latitude and longitude, possibly for a location in the Middle East based on the numerical ranges." Amara studied the phrase "desert rose blooms at midnight" with the focused intensity he brought to complex business negotiations. "Desert Rose was Qasim's code name, wasn't it?" he asked Rahman. Rahman nodded grimly. British intelligence confirmed it, but blooms at midnight suggests a time-sensitive operation or a specific access protocol. He activated his satellite communication system and began transmitting the coordinates to MI6 headquarters in London. Within minutes, they had confirmation that the coordinates pointed to a location in southern Iraq, near the oil fields where Qasim had been conducting his undercover work. Lord Edward's secure phone rang with the distinctive tone that indicated a call from British intelligence. After a brief, coded conversation, he turned to the group with an expression of grim satisfaction. "MI6 has been waiting 2 years for this information. The coordinates point to a hidden server farm where Meridian stores their encrypted communications and financial records, but accessing it requires biometric authentication that only Qasim could provide." "How is that possible?" Layla asked, confusion evident in her voice. "Qasim has been dead for 2 years. Voice recognition technology," Rahman explained. "If Qasim recorded specific activation phrases before his death, those recordings could potentially unlock the server system." "Miss Hassan, did your husband ever ask you to keep any unusual recordings or audio files?" Layla's mind raced through memories of their final months together, searching for anything that might have seemed odd or out of place. Suddenly, her eyes widened with realization. "The lullabies," she whispered. "He made recordings of himself, singing traditional Arabic lullabies for Noor. He said he wanted her to have his voice even if something happened to him during his travels." "Where are these recordings?" Amara asked urgently. "On my phone. I play them for Noor sometimes when she misses her father. Layla pulled out her modest smartphone, scrolling through the audio files until she found the folder labeled Baba's Songs. But as she played the first recording, they realized that mixed in with the genuine lullabies were phrases in English and Arabic that sounded like technical codes rather than children's songs. Lord Edward's expression grew increasingly serious as he listened to the recordings. Miss Hassan, these aren't just lullabies. They're voice keys for a sophisticated security system. Your husband embedded the access codes in songs for his daughter, knowing that you would preserve them as precious family memories. The genius of Qasim's plan was becoming clear. He had hidden the most sensitive intelligence information in the one place it would be absolutely safe, in recordings of a father singing to his beloved child. What happens now? Layla asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We go to Iraq, Rahman replied simply. MI6 will coordinate with international forces to raid the server farm, but they need someone who can authenticate Qasim's voice recordings at the actual location. The implications of the mission crashed over Layla like a wave of ice water. She would have to return to the country where her husband had been murdered, face the same dangers that had killed him, and potentially put herself in the crosshairs of the very people who wanted her dead. I can't take Noor into that kind of danger, she said firmly. She's already lost her father. I won't risk making her an orphan. Noor will remain here, Amara assured her immediately. Lord Edward and his staff will ensure her safety. But, Layla, you don't have to do this. We can find another way to access the information. No, Layla replied with quiet determination that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. Qasim died trying to expose these criminals. If I have the ability to complete his mission, to ensure that justice is done for him and for all their other victims, then I have to try. I owe him that much. As plans began taking shape for the most dangerous mission any of them had ever contemplated, Amara found himself torn between admiration for Layla's courage and terror at the thought of losing her to the same violence that had claimed her husband. The woman who had started as a translator for a business deal had become the key to an international intelligence operation that could bring down a terrorist network. But first, they had to survive long enough to reach Iraq, access the hidden servers, and escape before Meridian security forces could stop them. The next phase of their journey would test not just their courage and determination, but the growing bond between a billionaire who had everything to lose and a widow who had already lost everything except her daughter and her principles.